Ready? This is Dale Carson, attorney, Jacksonville, Florida, with another lawyer from the firm, Chris Carson, my son. And we want to talk to you briefly about how to avoid getting a traffic ticket once you've been stopped. Occasionally, we violate the law by speeding or trying to rush through a stoplight, an official traffic control device, as it's called. I've noticed lately that when it turns yellow, people tend to speed up. I don't think that's really the intention of what yellow lights are about, but they do that anyway. And I want to talk to you about how to avoid getting a traffic ticket. I was a cop in Miami. I wrote thousands of tickets. The primary purpose for writing a ticket, candidly, is to permit me to search your car and find illegal drugs, or better, the body in a trunk. But that's subject for another discussion. If you get stopped, you want to pull over safely, turn your blinker on, and wait for the officer to approach the car. You don't want to get hinky and reach for things in the car quickly. Wait for the officer to approach the side of the car. Now, all officers understand that people get nervous when they get pulled over. So they're going to expect you to be nervous. In fact, if you're not a little bit nervous, that's going to plug into their gut feeling and may cause a problem for you. So when you pull over a little bit more off the side of the road, because the officer's got to protect herself when she pulls the car up next to you. They're going to cant it so that if a car coming down that lane hits their trooper car first, it'll shear off and won't crush them when they're standing next to your door. So they come up, they're going to ask you some questions. The key here is to be polite. This is where you need to behave like you would around your grandmother. Not your mom, but your grandma. You're going to say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, ma'am. Should I give you my license? They're going to ask for it, and you should have that quickly available. We see this in DUI cases all the time. The officer says, he reached for his driver's license and he fumbled, he couldn't find it, he handed it to me, and then he said, do you still need my license? All of those things are critical. What I recommend, and we have these here at the office, it's a little thing that hooks onto the back of your cell phone. You can put your driver's license in here along with your credit card. If you call us, we'll send you one, right?
There you go.
And
that's
so
right.
Once you just reach in there and take out your DMV card, which is your registration, your driver's license, and finally, your insurance card. The officer, she has everything she needs. She then goes back to the car. Now, you're going to be anxious here because this is where you get a citation, right?
Sure. And I think that in this spot, this is one of the situations where being pleasant with the officer, just kind of understanding that in a sense the officer is just doing his or her job, can actually pay a lot of dividends. People don't always realize that when it comes to these situations, the officers do have discretion. All the talk of quotas and having to write a certain number of tickets, I feel that gets overblown a lot.
I agree.
And I think that sometimes if people are just simply polite with the officers and kind of understand that relationship dynamic, that can pay big dividends. We have lots of cases where the officers will cut our people breaks in terms of, let's say it's a speeding ticket, they may reduce the speed down. I've heard of lots of cases where the officers just basically gave the person a stern warning and sent them on their way.
Yeah, don't do that anymore, and off you go. Wouldn't that be nice?
Sure.
Simply because you've behaved, and the guy that she stopped previously was a real jerk and said, officer, why on earth you stopping me? I didn't do anything wrong. You should be arresting people that are really criminals. Leave me alone. So you're such a refreshing moment after that encounter that you're going to benefit from it. It's always best to use your manners. Now, one key point here. There's no need to admit your violation, okay? So don't say to the officer, officer, I know I was speeding. We don't get any points anywhere for that, okay? Particularly if you're talking to the judge. You're talking to the judge trying to get the traffic ticket dismissed, and the officer says, I wrote down right here what she said when I stopped her. She said, I just love to speed and I'm really good at it, Judge. And then we're in trouble, right?
Sure. And in those situations, if the officer does in fact decide to write you for a citation, you're not going to win that battle by the side of the road, so it's really not worth trying. There are ways that you can go in and contest those citations. That's what courtrooms were designed for, and ultimately that's where it needs to happen. So if you decide that you were wrongfully cited for whatever reason, and lots of wrongful citations are issued, the place to deal with it is not by the roadside. You're not going to make it better. You may well make it worse. The place to deal with that is in court. And if you do things like make statements or admissions, or in the alternative, just act like a jerk with the officer, that can backfire. I've seen cases where we have actually gone into court with clients and the judge put a lot of stock in the fact that our client was a complete jerk to the officer, and the officer told that to the court and said, and in fact, Judge, I definitely remember this guy because he was a total jerk to me. And judges actually do consider those things. Whether or not they should is a question for a different day, but they do. They're people, and in those spots, it doesn't make sense to try to win the battle by the side of the road. It's never one you're going to win, so simply hold your tongue. Take the ticket if they're going to give it to you. Go about your business, and then call us.
But Chris, don't pay it, right? Why shouldn't you just bite the bullet, go ahead and pay the citation, send it in? Why shouldn't they just do that? Isn't that easier than going through all the effort of finding an attorney who you trust and feel comfortable with, who will represent you?
Well, I guess it's easier in the sense that you can just stroke a check and be done with it. The practical problem is after you stroke that check to pay for the citation, you'll probably be stroking many more because as a result, your insurance is going to increase. By paying a ticket of any sort, you're admitting guilt. Admitting guilt means you get points on your license. That's a huge thing insurance companies look at when determining your rates. And as a result, it can get very expensive to go that way. There are quite a few alternatives to that take maybe a touch more effort on the front end, but will save lots of money and lots of energy on the back end. Something like traffic school, which many people are eligible for. Now that can be a pain, but that's kind of its own thing. But additionally, if you were to hire an attorney such as ourselves, we can actually go in and generally keep the points off of someone's license, which long-term is actually a big financial benefit. It potentially will keep their insurance rates down. In Florida, if the points are withheld for a traffic infraction and there are no claims paid out, meaning it wasn't an accident where an insurance company had to pay out a claim, by law, your rates cannot increase. So insurance companies are actually prevented from increasing your rates if the points are withheld on your citation. And that's lost on a lot of people. A lot of people just pay the ticket, don't even think anything about it until it comes time to renew
insurance. Didn't we recently have someone who paid the ticket and thought it was all through and then learned that their license was suspended because they failed to do traffic school, right?
Absolutely. There are certain infractions in the state of Florida that even if you pay them, there can be additional conditions that you have to abide by as well. In the event of, say, someone failing to obey a traffic control device, simply paying the citation isn't sufficient. DMV will actually suspend your license in certain circumstances unless you show them proof of completion of basic driver improvement school, which is a 4-hour class, the same one you would take if you had just elected it in the first place. But the problem is, even with that, you get the points on your license too. So there's actually some kind of strange rules that DMV follows, and you have to be very careful with them. If you're not, you can pay a big financial penalty. You can certainly lose your license in the wrong situation.
Chris, what about smoking dope and driving? I mean, is that a problem? If I get arrested for having possession of marijuana, and the police officer comes up to my car, I roll down the window and a cloud of cannabis rolls out into the officer's face. I mean, what's the potential problem with something like that?
Well, there are a number of them. Obviously, it would key in the officer that you may be in possession of something that's illegal, which could be a criminal offense, could be a misdemeanor or a felony, depending on the amount.
Right.
There could be other issues as well. Sometimes the odor of cannabis or something along those lines could actually trigger a DUI investigation. Typically, it's very tough to prove DUI if it's strictly something like marijuana, although I think that dynamic is changing a little bit. I know in some of the states that have legalized marijuana, they actually are beginning to get some tests that are more accurate as far as the psychoactive impact of THC. But with that said, it could trigger them to investigate and see whether anything else is in your blood or breath or urine as far as intoxicants go. So that could result in other types of criminal cases aside from just possessing the drugs.
What about license suspension? Isn't there a provision under Florida law that if you're using drugs, your license can be suspended?
Well, what it is, if someone is charged with possession of any what's known as 893 offense, 893 is the drug statute. If anyone is charged with an offense under 893 and they are ultimately convicted, meaning adjudicated guilty, even on a misdemeanor possession less than 20 grams, there is a mandatory year suspension on someone's Florida driver's license. Now, there are some workarounds for that, but you have to affirmatively do things, and it's a pain. But the way that the law is written, if you are convicted of possessing any 893 scheduled drug, then you will lose your driver's license in Florida for a year.
Well, how come nobody knows about that? I mean, that's something that people don't understand. They get convicted, their license is suspended. If you can't drive, then you're subject to being arrested. If you're driving on a suspended license, how do you get to work? I mean, how does your life go on?
Well, obviously, it's very difficult in this day and age, particularly in our area, to get around without a driver's license. Ultimately, it's the job of the lawyer handling the case to make sure that the clients are aware of that. And
right.
if they don't know that, then really shame on the attorney.
And there is a workaround for that can protect you?
There is. The way that the statute is written, a judge in a case of that nature can actually order the Department of Motor Vehicles to issue a hardship license or a business purposes only license to the individual immediately.
But they've got to ask for that, right?
Correct. It has to be dealt with the right way. And we've actually handled cases from other firms where we had to go back and fix that particular issue because some lawyers, actually a lot of lawyers, just aren't aware of that. But there is a workaround, but it's got to be dealt with the right way. Furthermore, it's discretionary on the judge. So just because it's possible doesn't mean it has to happen. Judges can deny them. They can say, no, I won't do that.
Is there a way that you position clients when they go talk to the court that would help them obtain that authorization from the judge? Is there classes that they can take?
Absolutely. It's not so much classes. What I typically do in that spot is I just kind of have my client provide some information to the judge to show what the significance of them having a driver's license is. I have children, I have school, I have work,
Right.
My loved one has medical issues and I have to transport them. We typically, in a sense, it's just kind of that mitigation angle. We try to provide them with as much information as we can to say, hey, this person's going to suffer a serious hardship without a license.
Chris, does that marijuana possession affect juvenile drivers? Drivers 18 and under?
It does. And actually, it affects it in the same way as it affects those who are over 18. But actually, DMV has some additional issues when you're in that window of the 16 to 18-year-old range,
right.
That can actually prohibit an individual driver from being able to get an unrestricted license until, I want to say, the age is 19.
Really?
Yeah.
So your family would suffer if they wanted you to be able to drive, and an adult would have to be with them, and a whole variety of things would have to be in place. Would that also affect their insurance, the fact that you have a child that's a dope smoker and is caught?
Well, potentially so. Honestly, I don't know that the possession itself is something that would have an impact on your insurance, but certainly if somebody had a DUI or anything of that nature, it absolutely could.
Gotcha. So the key here is to use your manners when you get stopped, to not get aggressive with the police officer while she's writing you the citation, to be pleasant, really, and to not make any admissions of your own guilt, and then to consider hiring a law firm to represent you in connection with the citation to save on insurance and even maybe the fine. It is possible that the court could set the fine at a lower rate than otherwise you might have to pay. And in addition to all of that, you want to make sure that if you have a citation and you pay it, that you don't also have to attend school, which candidly, if that were going to happen, you just attend the school as an election.
Correct.
Instead of paying the fine, right?
Absolutely.
Or do you have to pay the fine too?
No, absolutely. If you're going to elect school, just do it. Don't have DMV order you to do it as a condition of getting your license. It actually makes a lot more sense to just do that in the first place. With that said, it probably makes even more sense to not sit through the 4-hour class and actually just hire a lawyer to do it.
Right, because they don't even have to show up, do they?
Correct.
Let me ask you one other thing about these traffic citations. Do you handle a lot of commercial drivers? Do commercial drivers get tickets at the same rate that a standard driver does?
Well, yes and no. In my experience, the commercial drivers, I think, probably, well, number one, they're held to a higher standard. They drive professionally. They have some very specialized training. They have to actually go through lots of school, lots of classes. Generally, our commercial drivers have better, I guess, driving records per se than an average driver would. With that said, a lot of commercial drivers get cited, and the thing there, when we're talking commercial fellows, they typically have a whole lot more on the line than a standard, say, Class E driver's license, who, you know, okay, even worst case scenario, my insurance increases a little bit, I just deal with it and move on. Commercial drivers, they can lose their license, which is the key to their livelihood, very easily. It doesn't take much for a commercial driver to lose their license. They can run into big issues with their specific employer. Sometimes, even if their license is good, their employer will say, hey, this citation, I cannot keep you on anymore, because as an employer, it affects their insurance, because the drivers don't pay for the insurance, the business does. So if they're costing the business's bottom line significantly, which obviously there are a lot more liability risks when somebody's driving an 80,000-pound 18-wheeler than a 3,000-4,000 pound car. So they look at liability in a different way. Insurance is dealt with in a whole different way with commercial folks, and it can create big issues. If you are a commercial driver in particular, you need to look long and hard at hiring an attorney who has experience with that, because when things go south as a commercial driver, it can affect everything in your life. It goes well beyond a typical violation.
And if someone has a question or a problem related to their driver's license, it's no problem to just pick up the phone and call us, is there?
No, not at all.
And we're happy to talk to you, disclose exactly what we know, and allow you to make an informed decision about what you ought to do. Because in the state of Florida, certainly we've all got to drive, and if you can't drive, you create a hardship not only for yourself, but for everybody around you. And if you have questions or concerns about this or other issues related to the law, whether they're traffic or criminal, driver's license, it really doesn't matter. We're happy to give you advice. It's one of the things that we enjoy doing here at Dale Carson Law. So pick up the phone, call us, email us. We're available at www.dalecarsonlaw.com, and we again are happy to chat with you anytime. Stay tuned.